Hi, I'm Josh Rushing, filling in for Femi OK, and you are in the stream. Today, as the Syrian conflict rages on, one Kurdish group has made significant military and territorial gains. Is autonomous self-rule a possibility, or will disunity prevent it? Hey, our digital producer Malika Blau is here looking out for your live feedback. Malika, this is always one of the more active online communities, right?
Definitely, and active might be an understatement.
Wow.
So people are already debating, and they're debating whether or not autonomy is realistic. But even with those questions, people are still tweeting in to say they support a recent Syrian Kurdish declaration of autonomy. And there are tweets that look like this from Reshma, who says, Kurds in all other parts of Kurdistan overwhelmingly support the declaration of autonomy, including the strong diaspora. But of course, we want to hear your thoughts from all of you at home. So tweet us with the hashtag AJStream.
With us on set to discuss the way forward for Kurds in Syria is Omar Hassino, a researcher and independent Syria analyst. Omar, welcome to the stream.
Thank you.
All right, before we get to our conversation about the Kurds, here's a look at some of the stories that we're following. Syria's northeast could soon be home to a Kurdish autonomous area. This month, the Kurdish Democratic Union, or the PYD, announced that they are forming a transitional civic council following recent military gains in the area. The PYD has consistently fought for self-rule and is currently battling Syrian troops, but Syrian Kurds are not unified. The PYD's efforts have generated an angry response from other Kurdish groups who are aligned with different forces. Neighboring Turkey also said the declaration of an autonomous area is not possible. Kurds are often described as the largest stateless ethnic group, numbering about 30 million. They represent 15% of Syria's population. So can the Kurds actually benefit from the conflict in Syria? And will they be able to retain the progress they've made in the northeast? From Brussels, Sina Mohammed is the co-president of the People's Council of Western Kurdistan. And in our Google Plus Hangout, we're joined by Saif Badrkhan. He is the U.S. representative of the Kurdistan National Congress, or the KNK. And from Turkey, Ubey Shabander is the vice president for Middle East operations at the Syrian Support Group. All right, so I tell you, this is what our producers have been dealing with in the last week or so. If we can show my screen, it can be a pretty complicated process that's happening with the politics of Kurds in Syria. All these different groups are how they relate to one another, and I mean, it just looks like an engineering schematic. Omar, I'm going to ask you, can you cut through this and kind of simplify what's happening there right now?
So the Kurds are divided in Syria, and we have many different groups. You know, this group that we are discussing right now, the Kurdish Democratic Union Party, has declared autonomy about 2 weeks ago, saying that it was going to have interim administration of different regions in Syria, electing a constituent assembly to write an interim constitution for the region, as well as writing an electoral law. Now, they've already written certain laws into place in these different areas, including banning polygamy and other such laws, but they still say that they want to be part of Syria within the framework of democratic autonomy for the Kurds.
Is this like Iraq?
Well, when you talk to different PYD representatives, they say democratic autonomy could be defined broadly, that the Kurds need autonomous control of their own affairs, but they still want to be part of Syria. They give different examples. They don't necessarily say Iraq is the only example. They give examples of Canada, of the United States, and of different regions around the world. Now, another party that we have, or another major group of Kurds, is the Kurdish National Council, which
is this the KNK?
The KNC.
The KNC.
And the KNC is a group of around over a dozen Kurdish political parties that has openly declared their support, their strong support for the Syrian revolution. A lot of their members had come out in peaceful protests earlier, and is part of the Syrian National Council, Syrian National Coalition. As of just about a month ago, really, they officially joined in Istanbul. Now, this group says that that they want decentralization for Kurds. Actually, political decentralization is the term they use instead of democratic autonomy. Also very broadly defined. They don't really narrowly say what it is. And they give some of the same examples as the PYD, actually the United States, Canada, or perhaps Iraqi Kurdistan. Now, on the ground, we have different Kurdish groups that are armed. You know, the KNC, one party of the KNC has a militia, the Azadi party of Mustafa Jum'a, which has been fighting on the ground. It's fought before with the Free Syrian Army, but has also fought against Al-Qaeda-linked groups, such as in the Battle of Ras Al Ain and alongside of the PYD. We have different, the PYD and the KNC both are part of a larger group called the Kurdish Supreme Council for the administration of these areas. While the KNC has not accepted, except for one party in it, they have not accepted the PYD's declaration of autonomy. They both technically are still nominally part of this Kurdish Supreme Council, and the Kurdish Supreme Council has its own soldiers or security force called the Kurdish Self-Protection Units, the YPGs. So it's a rather confusing mix of
you were supposed to clarify it, Omar. No, I'm not. I think I got a sense, but one of the curious things I found here, and Sinam, if you can join in the conversation, is the PYD in the past has had conflict with the Assad regime, but now it seems as if the PYD's future would be benefited by the Assad regime winning the war there. Is that true?
Just I want to say at the beginning that the PYD, there is no relation between Al-Assad and PYD and other regime of Al-Bas. From before the revolution, before this revolution started, before 3 years or nearly 3 years, the Kurdish people in Syria, and especially PYD people, they suffered a lot from the regime. They persecuted the people and they put them in the jail for many years.
But Sinam, it seems like their futures are aligned now.
And now, I want to say something that the Kurdish people, they do not benefit from this conflict in Syria because they are a main part in the Syrian revolution. We are, as a Kurd people, we are the main part from this revolution in Syria. So, because of that, I don't accept that we are benefit from the conflict or such
well, I mean,
such
I would agree that the Kurdish people are certainly a critical part of the revolution. Unfortunately, I would certainly disagree with, and the realities on the ground, you know, bear testimony to this, is that the PYD has been a long-time ally of the Assad regime, and the PYD as a representative of the an offshoot of the PKK. We certainly do have evidence of the PYD cooperating with certain regime elements in northeast Syria, and that's been all, you know, part of a long and ongoing relationship with various elements within the Assad regime's security establishment. And even more, unfortunately, and even more disturbing is are the PYD's mirroring of the Assad regime's tactics when it comes to brutal suppression of any dissension. This is actually mainly targeting the Syrian Kurdish community. We have many instances of Syrian Kurdish activists who do not agree to the PYD coming in and taking total control of their areas, being brutally assassinated by PYD agents. In fact, this just happened last month. So there's certainly a great deal of concern on the ground among Syrian revolutionaries and Syrian Kurdish activists that the PYD in many instances is simply replacing the Assad regime and mirroring their tactics in brutal suppression.
Ubay, our community hears what you say, but they're disagreeing with a few parts of it. Now, online on Twitter, Dilgesh says, you don't have a relationship with a government, meaning the Assad government, that doesn't recognize your very existence. Yet, on the other hand, Saif, I want you to have a listen to this Facebook comment. Hariri says, some Kurdish parties took advantage of the revolution and cooperated with the tyrant regime to achieve their dream of generating an independent Kurdish country. So how do you push back against people who say Kurdish parties are taking advantage of this opportunity and taking advantage of the war?
The Kurds in Syria, they suffered for the last 90 years from the Syrian consecutive regimes. The Ba'ath Party have many destructive plans on Syria, the Arab belt, which to empty the Kurdish area from the Kurds, poverty, execution, preventing the Kurdish language, and also PAYDA established in 2003 to 2003. And in 2004, PAYDA led a revolt against the Syrian army, against the Syrian government, in which more than 90 Kurdish people get killed and more than 2,000 of PAYDA activists arrested by the Syrian regime. Until the year 2011, it was 1,550 PAYDA members in the prisons of the Syrian regime. During the revolution, it is the Syrian coalition and the KNC of Syria, that's their mistakes. Until now, they don't want to recognize the Kurdish movement. Why? Because they are controlled by the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood, they are allies of Erdogan. Erdogan gives them orders not to give the Kurds anything. Give them zero. Don't recognize them. Go attack their areas. The Turkish government support Daesh and Al-Nusra, which they are Al-Qaeda. They attacked by tens of thousands of their troops the Kurdish area by the support of Turkey and by the support of the Syrian coalition. And they attacked the Kurdish area to destroy it under the order from the orders from Turkey. They don't want to see the Kurds get anything. For this, they
at the same time, we actually are seeing
lies about
the PYD also attacking
the Syrian regime.
Syrian Kurds
hold on, Saif. Hold on,
do not adhere to their ideology. I mean, and so there's the inherent contradiction. We actually have a measure of unity between ethnic Syrian Kurds and ethnic Syrian Arabs in the opposition. Just a few weeks ago, the Kurdish National Council signed a historical accord where it joined the Syrian Opposition Council. The Syrian Opposition Council now represents a truly multi-ethnic body that represents all Syrians, to include Syrian Kurds. Now, the PYD has been on the outside of this because it continues to attack moderate Kurds that support a moderate, free Syria without Bashar al-Assad. So we now have certainly a level of hypocrisy by the PYD, which, by the way, is simply an extension of the Pakistan Workers' Party, the PKK, a internationally recognized terrorist group that is seeking to do Assad's bidding in Syria.
Okay, Ubay, let's go into that just for a bit. Hold on, guys. I'm going to go to my computer and show the audience a map. This is showing where the Kurdish population is located. You can see there's a little bit in Iran. Of course, they go across the top of Iraq where they have an autonomous area, the KRG, and then a large area of Turkey where they have the PKK. Omar, can you give us a little bit on the PKK and its relationship to the PYD, and particularly vis-a-vis the relationship with Ankara?
Yes, so the PYD has said it has no operational links to the PKK. However, it's sympathetic to the PKK's ideology. It believes in the PKK's ideology. The term democratic autonomy is actually a term that Abdullah Öcalan himself made up, the leader of the PKK, who is currently in jail in Turkey.
Didn't he spend a significant amount of time in Syria as well?
Yes, he did. And actually, Hafez al-Assad's regime, the previous the president, had actually trained Abdullah Öcalan in the Beqa Valley in Lebanon and had operational links with the PKK in the past. As the Syrian revolution went on, the Assad regime withdrew from these Kurdish territories in about July of 2012, which were then taken over by PYD forces, which are sympathetic with the PKK, which is a internationally recognized terrorist organization.
Then how does Ankara figure into this?
Now, Ankara has, of course, fought a 3 decades long war with the PKK. Right now there are peace talks between the PKK and Erdogan, the regime there in the government there in Ankara, which really have hit a standstill to this point. Also, the KRG government, the Kurdistan Regional Government of Iraq, led by President Masoud al-Barzani, is really no fan of the PKK. They have a very long ideological competition and rivalry that goes back decades.
There's actually a relationship between Barzani and the Turkish government now where they're pretty friendly, and they've sold out the PKK that kind of exist in pockets in northwestern Iraq.
Definitely. And what I would have to say, what I want to say about the PYD is that PYD is a very pragmatic party. They cooperate with Assad now because it's in their interests. Definitely during the Assad regime, Kurds suffered a lot. The Kurdish language was illegal, but like we've seen with other minority groups, the Assad regime has exploited the minority issue to try to get support and divide people against the rebels as the worst evil. You know, in the first week of the uprising, Assad gave citizenship to over 100,000 Kurds. He withdrew from these Kurdish areas. The PYD now controls them. If we really look at the clashes on the ground, while there were clashes between the PYD and Assad regime soldiers, that's undeniable. There are very few PYD members died fighting Assad. And while Saleh Muslim, the head of the PYD, had actually been in jail under the Assad regime, right now almost all of the PYD's battles on the ground have been against either the Free Syrian Army or Al-Qaeda linked or Salafi linked rebel groups, and not the Assad regime. We've had the PYD go into the town of Ras Al Ain, for instance, in northern Syria, where it actually defeated rebel groups and took the area back and put it in Kurdish control.
You mentioned the FSA there.
Yes.
I just want to go to my computer and show some of the organizations involved here. You can see the FSA is on the right-hand side there. They're backed by the US, the UK, Turkey. On that same side, you have the Army of Islam and Al-Qaeda. On the other side, you have Assad, the Iranian regime, Hezbollah. And it seems to all kind of go through the Kurds, which are in the middle here. What's the community saying?
Well, you raised a lot of things, Omar, and one of the things you talked about was minority groups. We're getting tweets on that, but I want to focus on something you said a little bit earlier before that about Turkey and their aim. Ruwaida Mustafa tweets in, she says, Turkey has not recognized the Declaration of Autonomy, but that's no surprise. They're never going to accept independence either. But Ubay, we have a video comment from someone who says, maybe they should. Have a listen to this.
Kurds in Syria are declaring this temporary administration to run their daily affairs. There is a vacuum in the region for a long time, so this move is for filling this vacuum. In addition to Kurds, Arabs, Christians, and other minorities are supporting this initiative as well. Kurds do not want to separate. They want to be a part of a Syria, a democratic Syria that treats them equally. So no regional country, including Turkey, should see this move as a threat. On the contrary, they should support this.
So in that video comment, he says no one should see this as a threat, but some groups do. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what's interesting is that many Kurdish groups view this unilateral decision by the PYD as being unrepresentative and as a threat. And the comment is certainly correct that most Syrian Kurds in Syria view themselves as being part of a Syrian state, and that there's very little sentiment on the ground that you could find that would actually support outright independence and total autonomy. Now, what's problematic with the PYD declaration was that the fact that many interpret this move as an attempt by the PYD to consolidate total control over the Syrian Kurdish or the Syrian Kurdish majority areas in northern Syria. And in doing so, they would leverage much of the same tools of suppression that the Assad regime used in order to maintain its hold on power. So this is not just problematic for non-Syrian Kurds, but problematic for the Syrian Kurdish community living in the areas that the PYD is attempting to expand its control.
Sinam, I'd like for you to respond to that, as well as accusations that there have been PYD political assassinations, that the PYD's interests are aligned with the Assad regime, and that they're philosophically connected to the PKK.
I want to correct something.
Again, I want to say something here. You must differentiate between the PKK and the PYD. PYD is a political party concerning with the Syrian people. PKK is a political Kurdish party concerning with the Kurdish people in Turkey. Yes, there is a relationship just because of Mr. Abdullah Öcalan. He stayed for 20 years in Syria. That's normal that you can adopt some of his thought. But there is physically there is no relationship between the PKK and PYD. This is one point. Another point. Why should the Kurdish people or the people in Western Kurdistan, all the people there, why should they announce to have such administration, self-administration in this region? First of all, we have to ask about ourselves why. First of all, there is a vacancy of the regime of Al-Assad. There, nothing is there. In all the places, in Afrin, in Derik, in Derbessiya, in Amuda, all these places, there is no presence for the regime centers or the regime's forces there. So there is a vacancy there.
Not
so
true.
we
That's
have
not
to
true.
fill
There are still
this
regime units
vacancy
operating in areas
by
that PYD control.
by building this.
I mean, you can go there and see yourself and come easily.
Yes, please.
Hey, hold on, guys. Actually, I want to let Saif get in here. Saif, are you there?
Yes.
I know you wanted to jump in. Go for it.
Yeah, I want to say that first I want to correct something. PYD didn't declare the administrative autonomy by themselves. It was 35 political parties, include the coordination committee.
Yeah, but most of them are very small, other than the PYD.
More than 4 Arab organizations, 5 Assyrians and organizations, and 4 or 5 political parties. They belong to KNC. Kurdish KNC, they participated with PYD. Second things, I want to say something about the KNC. KNC, they are now based in Erbil and in Ankara, in Turkey. They are working with the Turkish government, and their orders came to them to join the Kurdish coalition, and that's what happened. They are taking orders. They are not an independent group. Second, they are very small groups. When we talk about 13 political parties, each party has 20 or 30 members. You say this is a political parties. They are very small groups, all of them. Why PYD, they have millions of people behind them. They have more than 250,000 members. All those 14, 13 parties, they don't have maybe 2,000 members all over the world. They are very small. They are created by other powers.
So if the PYD is so popular, why was it depending on the use of force, and the use of weapons to force
Saif and Ubay, I'm going to jump in here because we got this tweet that pretty much describes what's going on. Omar tweets in, there's lots of unfounded accusations, he says, flying between Syrian Arabs and Syrian Kurds. To break through that, we are getting pushback online from Kurds. There's a tweet here from Hamo who says the PYD is not replacing the Assad regime and it's not oppressing Kurds. Their members are the people. So leading from that, Omar, we're seeing tweets about what we've talked about, the opposition, the Syrian opposition, and we're getting tweets from people who want a little bit of clarity. Ruwaida says the Syrian opposition has marginalized the voices of Kurdish masses and hasn't been fair in being inclusive of all groups. And another tweet similar to that, Han says the Syrian opposition has zero desire to fairly listen to the Kurds. They don't even want to drop the Arab from the Syrian Arab Republic.
Well, on the final point, the historic accord between the Syrian opposition and the Kurdish National Council that was just signed, I mean, it was just written a few months ago, and now with their joining the opposition a few weeks ago, does drop the name Arab from the name of the Syrian Arab Republic to Syrian Republic if the Syrian opposition would ever take over. But I think the sentiments are correct that are being said. You know, the Kurdish National Council group, you know, hesitated to join both the SNC, which many of its parties suspended membership of a part of in early 2012, and the Syrian coalition for a long time because they felt that the Kurdish people's demands were not met. Now, both the PYD and the Kurdish National Council do want some sort of federalism, let's say, or autonomy for Kurds in Syria as their goal. Now, both of them have differed in sort of the regional dynamics and who to ally with. The KNC Kurds see it as, let's join the opposition, let's be friends with Turkey, let's talk to Barzani, and let's try to get our rights that way. The PYD has seen, you know, let's stay neutral on the issue of the revolution. Let's not really attack Assad. Assad doesn't really hit them with airplanes. Let's take over.
We got about 30 seconds left on the show, so I'm going to cut you off. But you've got to join us on the post show here at stream.aljazeera.com because we saved one of the biggest questions for the post show, and that is what happens to the Kurds if the Assad regime wins the war or if they don't. So please join us in the post show for that. Tomorrow, Femi's going to be back. So thanks for having me in your homes. I appreciate it. And tomorrow, Femi, we'll be back and discussing on your television Indigenous education and reform in Canada. Until then, we'll see you online. Welcome back to the Streams Post Show. Today we're talking about the Kurds in Syria and what lies ahead for them. Let's get right back into the conversation. Ube, I'm going to go to you here, and we'll probably go around the table on this one. But lay out for me, what happens if the Assad regime remains in power and wins this war? What happens if they don't?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we're in the middle of a revolution. The Syrian revolution began as a movement to realize the rights for all Syrians, Kurds and non-Kurds alike. The Assad regime responded in brutality, arresting Kurdish activists, arresting activists across Syria's ethnic spectrum if they stood against the Assad regime and stood up for their rights and for a democratic and pluralistic Syria. So the Syrian Kurds are in the same boat of the current revolutionary, of the revolutionary forces, and free Syrians that want a better and a freer Syria for themselves and for their children. The reality is that an Assad victory does not bode well for the Kurdish people. I mean, we cannot forget the years of oppression that the Kurds, along with all Syrians, faced by the Assad regime, and that's exactly what will happen if the Assad regime is successful in its attempts to carry out a divide and conquer strategy. And we must prevent that from happening, otherwise we will all suffer throughout Syria, Kurds, Arabs, everyone.
Sinem, do you agree with that?
Yeah. I want to say also here, to join that the people in Syria and the Kurdish people in Syria, they are, again, I want to repeat it so many times, they are the main part in this revolution. And because of the other groups who are rises up now and want to spread their ideology by force and doesn't recognize the rights of the existence or the rights of the other people, like Kurdish people in Syria, I think these groups and this will not be successful. Here, what we want to say that this administration in the self-administration or the interim administration in the Western Kurdistan, it doesn't concern only the Kurdish people. It concerns everybody who is living in the Western Kurdistan. That means all the component in the Western Kurdistan, the Syrians, the Armenians, the Kurdish, as well as the Arab people. So when we discuss to build such administration, we are discussing it at the base to build a new democratic system in Syria. We want a democratic Syria, and we want to build a democratic constitution in Syria, because as you know, Syria is a pluralistic country. It is multi-nations, multicultural is there. So you have to build what we aim to in building such administration. We aim to build a new democratic constitution in Syria. That means the rights for everybody, the components in Syria, they have their rights there.
Well, Saif, I want to bring Saif in here, Sinem, on the back of what you're saying, because I'd like to get Saif's views on what you're saying, but also in the answer to this question of what happens if and when the Syrian conflict ends, which is what Sinem was answering. People are talking about unity, and how does that play into this? On Twitter, Bekstiar says, unfortunately, most Kurdish parties in Syria aren't unified. This may threaten the future of Kurds in the post-Assad era. And on Facebook, we got a comment from Gail, Saif, who says, they all have their own agenda. After the unity of fighting, they will once again split and fight amongst themselves. And Gail is talking about Kurds in the region. So what are your views on whether or not the Kurdish community is united enough?
Now, it is a normal thing that all the people will not be same. Now, as the Arab opposition, now we have seen they have so many groups. We have the coalition, we have the coordination body, we have the military who are fighting on the ground now. The free under the name of the Free Syrian Army. They are not united. They are really so many groups with different ideology, with different thought, and with different heads also. Each group has a different head, and they are fighting sometimes together. But as for the Kurdish people, as a military, they are really united. under the name of the People Protection Units. And we have, politically, we have two councils, the People Council for Western Kurdistan, PYD party, and we have the Kurdish National Council. And it is normal that you have different ideas or different point of views, but at the end, we formed a Supreme Kurdish Committee which represent all the Kurdish people in the Western Kurdistan in Syria. Now the Kurdish National Council, it joins the coalitions, Syrian coalitions, but we see it is a wrong step, because this coalition, we are not doing any enmity with the coalition.
All right, Sina, hold on a second. I want to get Saif in here while we still have time. Saif, can you look into the future and tell us what you're thinking if happens if Assad seems to withstand this or he doesn't?
First, nothing will happen that Assad will go as he was before, the supreme leader of Syria. And I don't think the nations of the world will let him have complete victory all over Syria, particularly Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, the Western countries, the 11 countries who met in France. They are not going to allow him to have that. So it's going to be something different when Assad, if he win also the war, win the election, will be different Syria. It's not going to be the same as it was before. So the Kurds maybe will have a chance, but also we have, I'm asking the Syrian opposition and the Kurdish National Council to reconsider their relations with the PYD and with the local administration, and to recognize the Kurdish rights. That's the only difference between them and PYD, is the Kurdish rights. If they recognize this administration and the Kurdish rights, then I can see that the whole Syrian opposition will be united in one group.
United Syrian opposition.
They are not
can you look into your crystal ball and tell me?
Why the Kurds have to work.
Hold on, Saif. Can you look into your crystal ball and tell me what happens here in the future?
Well, it seems the Kurds are very disunited and the Syrian opposition is very disunited, but both are pretty much united on one thing. The Kurdish parties are united in that they want Kurdish rights in Syria and some sort of federalism and autonomy. And it seems that the Syrian opposition parties, from the Muslim Brotherhood to other secular parties to fighters on the ground, battalions such as the Ahrar Sham, Salafi groups, are united that it's a red line that there will be no autonomy or federalism for Kurds in Syria. And so this seems to be an unbridgeable divide between both sides that it doesn't look like is going to be resolved anytime soon, unfortunately.
It sounds like a looming second war.
Well, I mean, it's already been the war, a second war on the ground already. I mean, we've had Al-Qaeda-linked groups attack Kurds. Just 2 weeks ago, a suicide bomber blew himself up in Qamishli, killing many civilians. He was actually a Kurdish suicide bomber who was a member of Al-Qaeda, to make things even more confusing. You know, we've had Kurdish PYD groups go into Arab areas and take them out. And Saleh Muslim, the head of the PYD, just 3 days ago said the war is looming against the Arabs, and said that the Arabs that live in the Kurdish areas that were put there by the Assad regime through Arabization policies of the area may have to be forcibly removed. And so it looks like this is going to be a conflict that's going to unfortunately plague Syria for some time to come.
Wow. All right, that's going to be the last word on this one today. Femi's going to be back tomorrow with you, doing a great show about Canada and the Inuit up there with the education reform. In the meantime, tomorrow in the U.S. is Thanksgiving, so I thought I'd take a moment and just thank the Stream team, one for having me, and two for creating this little part of the universe where television and the internet intersect. And it's one of my favorite neighborhoods out there in internet TV land.
You're welcome anytime.
I'm a big fan. I watch every time I can. So thanks for having me. Look forward to the show tomorrow on Canada. Until then, we'll see you online.